War is hell, but giant robots kick ass.
Powerful Nerdcast assemble!
Stay dandy, baby. Mobile Suit Gundam. Need I say more? When talking about long-running anime franchises, Mobile Suit Gundam has got to be at least in the top 5 in my opinion. Breaking ground in the late 1970s and exploding in the 1980s, Gundam is a franchise which basically revolutionized the entire concept of mecha anime. Everything that came before it was ridiculous, over the top, and very inspired by the concept of superheroes and maybe even Super Sentai itself. Gundam took it in a more realistic direction, and it did that not only with its actual mecha itself, but its characters and its storytelling. Darker, grittier, politically complex, the Mobile Suit Gundam anime franchise is nothing short of a revolution. It also happens to be a juggernaut in terms of its merchandise, in particular the Gundam model kits, which are definitely one of the biggest aspects of the Gundam fanbase. They look great, they're fun to build, and most importantly, you can display them anywhere you want, and it gives you an opportunity to admire the designs of these robots. And while I love just about every single iteration of the Gundam anime franchise, the thing that keeps me coming back every single time has got to be the titular mobile suits themselves, the Gundams. What started out as a sleek robotic samurai has evolved and branched off into a number of different directions, whether it's more militaristic, more outlandish, or downright insane. I'm always down for a brand new Gundam anime series with new characters and a complex storyline, but really, I just want to see those mecha in action, and it's one of my favorite things about the franchise, and frankly, goddammit, this list has been a long time coming. I've been wanting to make a top 10 favorite Gundam list for a very long time, and the reason it's been so difficult is because they're always adding brand new series to the franchise, so my list is constantly changing, and for all I know, the next time I do this video, which is almost an inevitability, it's going to change again as well. But that's pretty much what today's video is all about, is I'm going to count down my top 10 favorite Gundams from the Mobile Suit Gundam anime franchise. Couple rules. First and foremost, this is exclusively going to focus on the actual Gundam mobile suits themselves. If I was just picking from any random mobile suit from the franchise, this list would almost be impossible to make and would feature a weird mixture of traditional mobile suits as well as the Gundams themselves. But today, we're talking about those V-crested samurai robots, my favorite ones from the series, and honestly, this is in no particular order. These are simply just the ones that I love. If you yourself are a big fan of the Gundam franchise, there's a pretty good chance that your favorite is not going to be on this list. But if any of you do have some top 10 favorite Gundams, make sure to sound off in the comments section and tell me what they are. Maybe even tell me a little bit why you like them and maybe some of your favorite Mobile Suit Gundam memories. So let's waste no more time, let's go ahead and jump into the cockpit. These are my top 10 favorite Gundams. Mobile Fighter G Gundam is absolutely insane. It was almost impossible to choose a Gundam from this series as I have so many favorites, but I am actually going to have to go with the main character's Gundam, the God Gundam, otherwise known as the Burning Gundam in America. Mobile Fighter G Gundam was essentially a tournament-style fighting series, so a lot of these Gundams had to be equipped to fight hand-to-hand combat, and the main character of this series, Domon Kashi, went through a number of different Gundam iterations, but his final one being the God Gundam, which was sleek, powerful, and had all of the traditional weapons that you would expect from a typical Gundam. However, it did have one distinctive ability, its Shining Finger, or its most upgraded form, the God Finger. Essentially, his entire hand would be clad in this very powerful energy, allowing him to grab onto the face or head of any mobile suit and instantly crush it in a blinding light. Not only is this one of the most unique abilities seen from just about any Gundam, but I got amped up every single time that Domon would use this attack, and even when they reused the animation, every single time that music started up and he started giving his epic speech, it just got me so damned excited. Really, it's the perfect combination of the classic design of the Gundam while also giving it an amazingly unique weapon and ability. I love traditional Gundam anime series, but even I'll admit that I am a really big fan of Gundam Build Fighters and Gundam Build Fighters Tri. And I gotta give the series some credit. It actually made me care about SD Gundams. I've made it very clear in the past when I've talked about the franchise, I've never really been too big into the whole SD Gundam thing. I mean, I know the whole purpose of it is that it's supposed to be kind of cute and funny, but I have to admit that star-winning Gundam is all sorts of badass. Utilized by the member of Team Tri, Fumina Hoshino, the star-winning Gundam is very unique in that at first it was just simply shown as an SD Gundam. I really liked the color scheme, but it didn't really blow me away. That was until we got to actually learn that it could go through a transformation sequence, effectively turning it into its real mode, which makes it look like a more traditional Gundam. When speaking of aesthetics, that's pretty much the main reason why I love this Gundam. I just love the sharp design, the amazing color scheme, and of course, its incredibly unique gimmick of being able to go from an SD Gundam to a regular one. Of the three main characters, to me, Fumina's Gundam was, without a shadow of a doubt, the most unique, and it still manages to stick out in my mind today, and manages to be my favorite iteration of any SD Gundam. The Gundam anime franchise has a number of different iterations, and some of them follow a single continuity, like stories which take place in the Universal Century, and then there's the occasional spin-off, which pretty much does its very own thing. And I think one of the strongest examples of this is Mobile Suit Gundam Iron-Blooded Orphans. The series manages to tackle some pretty heavy themes, but it also happens to have some incredibly endearing characters, and while I certainly do enjoy the main ones, my favorite character from the series is none other than Space Guts himself, Akihiro. And Akihiro just so happens to have a Gundam which reflects his personality perfectly. The Gundam Gusion Rebake Full City. This Gundam is big, loud, and destructive. It is one of the most unique Gundam from the entire series. What I also really loved about Iron-Blooded Orphans is that it actually ditches a lot of the traditional weapons that we've seen from some of the previous Gundam anime series, which means a severe lack of beam weapons, and in its place are going to be large, loud, blunt weapons. And the Gusion Rebake has, without a shadow of a doubt, one of the most ridiculous ones possible, which is essentially a giant pair of scissors or clamps, which it quite literally uses to attack its enemies and crush them. In fact, I would say that Akihiro's biggest moment from the entire series is when he finally got revenge against a certain asshole and managed to crush him in his mobile suit, all in a blaze of glory. Yes, it's time to talk about Gundam Build Fighters yet again, and like I said before, it's really hard to try and choose your favorite from the series, as it picks and pulls a lot of classic Gundams and gives them some really cool makeovers. In the first iteration, Gundam Build Fighters certainly had a lot of those, but even at the end of the day, I absolutely love Sei and Reiji's Gundam, the Star Build Strike. This may come as a surprise, but I like Gundam Seed, but I don't necessarily love it. I like a lot of its mobile suits and what they did with them, but to me they were kind of stock. However, Gundam Build Fighters did a great job of incorporating one of its main Gundams and transforming it into something else entirely, strapping it out with all manner of ridiculous weapons, especially its knuckle attack. Star Build Strike takes what is effectively a more modern interpretation of the original Gundam and basically fills it out with a ton of really interesting weapons, not to mention its RG system, which allows it to move incredibly fast as well as power up all of its distinctive techniques. And like I said, its knuckle attack is just big and awesome. It kind of reminds me of God Gundam in some senses. I'm always a big sucker for giant punching attacks. I especially love this Gundam as it's a personal reflection of the relationship between Sei and Reiji, which is unique for the series to say the least, as effectively this is a mobile suit which has two pilots, or at least two controllers. A Gundam fanboy and an expert pilot have created the perfect mobile suit, and it still manages to stick out in my mind today. Like most people growing up in America, my very first exposure to Gundam was through Gundam Wing, and I loved the mobile suits in this series, but one of my absolute favorites has got to be Gundam Epyon. To me, this is essentially the Shadow the Hedgehog of the entire franchise. I love how dark and edgy it is and the fact that it's effectively a Dragon Gundam, and while we have a lot of those in the franchise, I can honestly say that Epyon is probably my favorite. Originally an experimental mobile suit created for the main character Hiro Yui, it eventually went to the main villain slash anti-hero Zex Marquise, otherwise known as Milliardo Peacecraft, and it effectively ended up being the main antagonistic force by the end of the series, and it just looks so damn cool. This is like one of the more superficial ones on my list. I simply just like it for its overall aesthetic. I love its giant whip, I love its ridiculous beam sword, those super badass blades, and oh yeah, it can transform into a giant two-headed robotic dragon. Yeah, this thing's just fucking cool. For as complex as the designs could be in the series, I still think that the original Gundam itself is just classic. This is the one that set the standard. This is the one that is still the baseline for just about every single Gundam design that we see today. And it's easy to see why. It's simply just perfect. Somehow, I don't know how it pulls it off, but the original RX-78-2 Gundam manages to be both realistic and fantastical all at the same time. As I said, it was sort of a revolution for the whole real robot genre, and we really get to see that in action in the original series. Piloted by the original Gundam pilot himself, Amuro Ray, this thing is just filled with some interesting abilities. Not only creating some of the signatures we'd see from the show, such as beam sabers and rifles and giant shields, but it also has other ridiculous weapons like a bazooka, super napalm, and a goddamn flail. The original Gundam itself is the groundwork for the entire franchise, and there's a reason why it's still so popular today. It's simply just iconic. I'm going to cheat on this one a little bit, as I am technically going to be talking about two mobile suits, and they also happen to be from two completely different series. But the fact of the matter is, I love Gundam Exia. Originally seen in Gundam 00 and piloted by Setsuna F. Seiei, this to me was like the perfect modern version of the original Gundam. Managing to not only have some of that original aesthetic in terms of its color design, but also having some uniqueness, like this one gigantic ridiculous sword. This is one of those Gundams that when I saw it for the very first time in its first episode of Gundam 00, I absolutely fell in love with it. In fact, it was also one of the very first Gunpla Gundam models that I ever purchased. But I said that I'm talking about two different Gundams here, so I also have to bring up the Exia Dark Matter from Gundam Build Fighters. Carrying a lot of its similar aesthetic, but also giving it a coat of paint which definitely reminds me of Gundam Epyon from Gundam Wing, Exia Dark Matter is sort of like the final villainous mobile suit of the entire series. I mean, not truly or anything, but damn it, this thing just looks incredible. Dark, edgy, filled with all sorts of weapons, most of which are very sharp and very long blades. Both Exia and Exia Dark Matter are truly, I think, one of the better modern-looking Gundams that I have ever seen. Gundam Thunderbolt is hardcore. It also manages to be ridiculous and over the top, but not in the same way that, say, G Gundam is. Basically, this is a series that gilds the lily. It's basically like saying, does your tank need a chainsaw and a bazooka attached to it? E.O. Fleming is a really interesting character in the series, and his first Gundam in the show is nothing short of awesome. It's basically the original RX-78 Gundam, which is just strapped out. But it's his Atlas Gundam, which really manages to catch my attention with its incredibly unique color scheme, not to mention its unique sub-leg system. This system allows the Atlas Gundam to essentially perform in just about any atmosphere: Earth, underwater, in space. It's also got some amazingly unique weapons, such as this gnarly-ass railgun, not to mention a giant shield, which is covered with blades. But I also absolutely love its sleek, rounded design, not to mention that color scheme, which absolutely pops. The Atlas Gundam is a host unto itself. It can truly carry the entire series with its unique design. I've never seen anything else like it, and it's the type of Gundam that really makes you want to buy a Gundam model based exclusively on it. Really, it's just because it looks awesome. As I mentioned before, Gundam Wing was my introduction to the entire franchise, and the first one that stuck out to me, and the one that I still think is my absolute favorite from that series, is none other than Gundam Deathscythe. First off, just saying that out loud is incredibly badass and metal. This Gundam is the personification of the Grim Reaper, of death itself. It also happens to be piloted by Duo Maxwell, a character who is also associated with death, so it's very thematic as well. But there's no getting around it. This thing is cool because it's sleek, it's black, and it has a giant beam scythe. Let's put that into perspective a little bit. This is essentially a scythe lightsaber on a giant robot. Can you not understand why that's fucking cool? And just like a lot of the other Gundams from this series, it goes through a number of upgrades, its second one not being super significant, but the one that's seen in Endless Waltz is got to be one of the most devilishly cool mobile suits that I've ever seen. It basically transforms the thing into a damn demon. It's a shame that we didn't get to see it in action more, but this one still sticks out in my mind as one of the most unique mobile suits from the entire franchise, and ironically, not the only one that has a giant beam scythe, but still the one that sort of set the standard, and still my favorite Gundam from Gundam Wing. When I started this video, I said that these were in no particular order, but if I did have like one favorite Gundam from the entire series, it's one that's actually, I think, going to be a little shocking for you, especially because it's one of the more grounded mobile suits from the entire series, but it happens to come from my favorite Gundam anime series, Mobile Suit Gundam, the 8th MS Team. I'm talking about the Easy-8. The Easy-8 might be the most normal, militaristic looking Gundam in the entire franchise. It doesn't even have the traditional V crest. However, this is a Gundam which fits perfectly within this series, which to me is one of the more grounded stories that we've seen in the entire franchise. Set within the original continuity of Universal Century and set during the events of the original series, this is a Gundam which is piloted by Shiro Amada, who also just happens to be one of my favorite characters from the entire series, and like a lot of other members in his squad on Earth, he piloted a ground-type Gundam, which were essentially these mass-produced versions of the original RX-78-2. However, through a lot of crazy events, this mobile suit ends up getting destroyed, and through some weird Frankensteining, they managed to give him this brand new version known as the Easy-8, which, like I said, is definitely more realistic in terms of its design, but I don't know. I really think that this is sort of the perfect personification of what Gundam was trying to accomplish from the beginning, ditching a lot of that sort of silly, over-the-top colors used in the original Gundam and making it look less like a giant robot space samurai and more into an actual military weapon. It also just so happens to be featured in what is probably my favorite mobile suit battle of the entire franchise, a realistic fight in a massive city against a mobile suit which is known as the Goof. This is a true military battle if I have ever seen one, strategic and explosive. I'd also be remiss if I didn't mention that when Shiro is battling against Norris Packard in his Goof, he suddenly is getting pushed up against a wall when he decides to kick back, rip his very own mobile suit's arm off, and continue to beat this thing with it. It's one of those moments that always sticks out in my mind when I think of the franchise, and especially of the 8th MS Team, and it's a moment that continues to be one of my favorite anime moments of all time. I'd even go as far as to say that Gundam Easy-8 is probably my favorite anime mecha of all time, and that still manages to surprise me. With as creative as the series can actually get with its mobile suits and the weapons that they use, the simplest one still manages to be my favorite. And that, my friends, is my top 10 favorite Gundams from Mobile Suit Gundam. Did any of yours make the list? Do you have your very own top 10? Make sure to sound off in the comments section and tell me what they are. And of course, just let's talk about Gundam a little bit, because it's a classic long-running franchise for a reason. People really seem to like it, and I'd love to get your thoughts about the entire show in the comments. Thank you guys so much again for watching this video. I'll see you all next time, and as always, stay down there, baby.